including model emulation and uncertainty assessment. So that was the challenge we gave to the three speakers who are in this session. And Danny Williams is going to kick us off, talking about scalable uncertainty quantification. So Danny, please, over to you.
Thanks. So I'm going to talk about UQ that I've done for spatial models, because I thought for decision making in the landscape, most of our models, whatever we mean by models, will have some sort of spatial kind of output, something to do with the land. But I wanted to start by asking this question. So decision making uncertainty is quite a difficult thing to do unless we know what uncertainty is. So think about that question. What is uncertainty? I bet we all actually have a different feeling for what uncertainty is. Gavin plead that we all think about what the decisions are. I'd also like us to just briefly think, what is that? Now, if you go and look on Wikipedia, you'll get an answer. It says it's an unintelligible expression without straightforward description. So as we go through the month, we'll talk a lot about quantifying the uncertainty, but I don't know what we mean by that. Error bars on the error bars or whatever. So anyway, something to think about. I will use uncertainty throughout this talk, and not even I'm sure what I mean by it. So most of my work is with climate models, which I believe will share a lot of features with land models. In fact, a lot of climate models have land models inside them. So essentially you have some equations, maybe it's PDEs, maybe it's a hybrid, maybe it's agent-based, and then they're kind of solved in space in little boxes that are chosen for convenience and because we can compute what we can compute. And then you change the parameters of these models, they give you some answer, and then in principle we want to use those answers to either make decisions or say what's going on in the real world. So I'm a mathematician. There'll be equations. Mostly I'm going to skip over them. The slides are available afterwards so that you can use them as a reference. But I won't skip over the first couple. So I'm interested in something real in the real world. That's going to be Y. So climate here, or some feature of the land that we might actually make decisions for. And then I have some observations of that land or that climate. Not all of it, because I'm not going to observe the future. And I might only observe pieces of it. My data might be noisy, it might come from a satellite, but whatever. So my observations are not the real. There's some part of the real and there's some error. And then I have what I call the computer simulator, but a model for the real. But maybe it's agent-based, maybe it's whatever, but it's a model. And that model will have some parameters that live in some space. And then the questions that my field wants to ask are, well, what should the parameters of this be? And how does model world tell me about real world? If we're going to make decisions and have them informed by models, we should probably know how model world is related to real world, because the decisions will be real. So in statistics and UQ, we have a formulation that says, okay, real world is related to model world by saying that there is a value of the parameters where the model is as close to real as it can be. And then there's a structural uncertainty left over. So there's a bit in real that is not in model. And then there are methods to try and infer these things. The one I won't talk about is Bayesian calibration. I think it's a tricky and dangerous thing to do, but see some other stuff I've written on that. History matching is similar, but instead of trying to find a probability distribution for where best model is, it tries to look at all of your parameter space and say, these parts of the space they're nothing like real world. We can't look at models from there. That's nonsense. What's left, we'll explore a bit further and move on. Okay, so how do you do that? last equation that's going to be important. We look at the distance. This is just the standardized distance between the observations and the model at any point in x. So it's just a distance. And when this distance is too big, we say it's no good. Yeah, this model, if this distance is too big, could not be close enough to the observations that I should use this model to make decisions. And so then I throw away all the models where this is too big. So I keep the space where this distance is less than the threshold, and there's some theory on the properties of this for how to choose this threshold. Why don't I say that the models in this set are good? There's two reasons this distance could be small. Either my model is really close to the observations, which is a big win, so models are good, or I'm really uncertain. And so I need to go back and do some more experiments to reduce this before I can say what's good. So because of that, we take the space of all of the model runs, we cut it, and then in that space that's left, we run the model again. We know a lot more about the model now, and we repeat until we sort of zoom in on good areas of parameter space. Okay, so I'm going to show that happening. First, you need a statistical model to do this because it would require many millions of evaluations of your model, and usually that's not possible, certainly not in climate. So an emulator, by the way, Peter asked me to talk about emulators, so I think I'm on brief. And I'm going to do it with pictures, and the equations are afterwards for reference. So an emulator is a distribution over functions. So we have an unknown function, the model. It's a function of some inputs, and we put a probability distribution over it, and then we evaluate the function in some places. In this one, just these 3 places, and our distribution changes so that we know the function here. This is our uncertainty. This is our best guess, but we have a probability distribution in between. And so, yes, the best guess falls within the uncertainty. The truth should, if we've done it right. But here, 3 runs didn't seem like enough to build a good one because we're really, really uncertain. So with a few more runs, you get nice tight uncertainty. And then you can use this thing that takes a second or less than a second in place of your, let's say, climate model that maybe takes a couple of weeks to run on a supercomputer. Now, when you have that, oh, this is the emulator equation. Skip. This is like my picture of a guy holding a salmon for a mathematician. This, anyway, you can infer from that what you will. So, emulator here at the top. And now suppose the goal is we have some observed values of real here with uncertainty, and we want to try this history matching idea, which is a form of calibration. So my distance in log is this function here. It wobbles around, and the threshold in log is down here. So everything where the distance is small enough we just keep, and everything where the model is too far from the observations we just throw away. So you can see that when we're sure that the model is far away, we get these big values. We can throw away the model in this part of parameter space, we can throw it away in this part of space, and we can throw it away in this part of space. Everywhere else, yes, the function's crap up here, but we're still uncertain about it. So this bit is not ruled out yet. We keep it. We keep this bit, we keep this bit. And then you run the model again. So we do that. Our emulator gets better. We're still kind of uncertain up here. But now we know that the parameter space is not very good over here, and we just get these 2 little regions. And you can repeat as often as you want. And it's great because you end up with a set of models that all pass whatever constraints you've given them to pass, and so you get some sense of uncertainty if you want to use those models by pushing them into other models and downstream into decision making. So we've done this for a number of different climate models. This was my work with NEMO, which is the ocean model of all but 2 now, I think, of the world's climate models, but it's originally the French one, and we use it here for the UK. Now, the observations are the red line, bounded by their uncertainty. This thick blue line was the current version of NEMO that they were using, that they wanted to tune, and this is salinity and depth. And we actually tuned to temperature, not salinity, but salinity is a sort of clearer picture and to get an idea of what's going on. So we build an emulator and then we rule out the space. We don't rule out the model runs, we rule out the space. So all of these are supercomputer integrations of NEMO, and some live in the space that we cut out, that's the gray ones. Some live in the space that we left in, that's the blue ones. And so when we repeat this 3 times, this was temperature, you start to get nice concentration of all of your model runs sort of landing within the observations. That's temperature, that's salinity. So the idea is you don't cut the runs out, you cut the space, which means that you can run the model in the space that is not ruled out yet, not bad necessarily, or whatever safe words you want to use to get yourself out of predicting for sure. The other reason we like it is that you can actually map parameter space. So this is, these are 2D projections of the 5D object of the parameter space that's left of the French convection model. So the French modelers have all of our code and have built it into their systems, and so they produce these things routinely. You have 5 parameters in this particular parameterization they're developing, and any pixel up here represents the proportion of points behind it in the other 3 dimensions that are still in after this cutting exercise. So gray, everything's cut out, and then the sort of yellow strip is where about 70% of the models are. So you see you're looking at the sort of 5D object. And then the green bits we only look at if the uncertainty is low enough, so that's that distance, and low values of the distance when the uncertainty's gone mean good models. So this is really cool because they actually develop models using this. They put new parameterizations in. Does it change the picture? If not, what was the point? Interesting stuff. So now I get to the type of model output that we find that we've been working on, because this is what climate modelers want to do, and I suspect this is what people want to do in land use modeling as well. Models that output spatial fields. So this is sea level pressure in the Canadian model. There are 8,192 grid boxes here. And you might have lots of these fields at the same time. So how does that schematic of an emulator with 1 output, 1 input scale up to doing something on spatial scales? So some people, some in the community, would build a GP for every one of those 8,000 grid boxes. Some will use some sort of dimension reduction, and that's what I'm going to argue for here. So who's heard of EOFs? They're the climate scientists. Who's heard of principal components? Quite mathsy in here. So this is the idea that the Met Office used for UK CP09, and it's been around since about 2008. You take all of your model runs, the spatial fields, stack them into vectors, put them in a matrix column-wise, and then do the SVD, or the EOF decomposition, whatever, the good old second year linear algebra diagonalization stuff. And then this matrix on the right, the columns are basis vectors, and you can reproduce any run by linear combinations of these basis vectors, and they're stacked in the order that the first Q explain most of the variability. Okay, standard stuff. So what you do is you take each of your model runs that you have and you project them onto this basis. That's just linear projection, orthogonal projection, and you get coefficients. So you go from 8,192 grid boxes to about 12 or so. And then you build GPs for these 12, and then you can reconstruct the whole spatial field by just multiplying on the left by this guy. And the problem is, our recent work shows it doesn't work in general. Why? So the problem with that situation is that the observations, the things that you care about, the real, doesn't necessarily have anything to do with the directions you've picked out of your ensemble. So here's a test case. We have a model that we invented that spits out a 10 by 10 field. This is one of the model runs, and we're going to call it the closest thing we have to the observation. So it's Highlight is a big strong feature on the diagonal. So we imagine this might be an ocean current you care about or a particular system that you're interested in. You can imagine a land equivalent. And the problem is when you run the model at a first pass, most of them have an off-diagonal thing. These are both, well, this is a mean of about 60 model runs, this is a model run. When you do this projection game, you take the actual observations, put them onto that basis, and then recover the signal, you get nothing back. So if I found the magic parameters where the model produced the observations exactly, when I did the history matching, I think they were massively far away, and I would throw them away. So our paper down here proposes a rotation that corrects that. You can look why, but basically we try to minimize that reprojection distance in the choice of the basis. It's great, the code is online with the paper, and if you're already doing this stuff, you can just add those 2 lines of code and carry on as normal. And all that is doing is ensuring that the observations, when you go through this scheme, look like that. So, how does it compare to the 8,000 emulators case? So we take, I've taken 62 members of the Canadian atmosphere model, just sea level pressure, and I reserved 50 of them as a let's see how we're doing, and I picked one of them as the truth, again, so that we can actually see how we're doing. And then we use, we don't use our own code because that wouldn't be transparent. We use something that's openly available on R to build emulators in all of these cases. So we do the PCA one, our one, and the every grid box approach. So we have a table. I'll just highlight a couple of lines that are interesting. These two are the median error from doing the different approaches in terms of predicting a new member, and we're all kind of doing about the same. I mean, yes, in principle this shows that we do better, but it's not by much. The 2 things to highlight are the reconstruction error for doing every grid box at a time is 0. So you have 8,000 degrees of freedom if you build 8,000 statistical models. The problem is you end up extrapolating on at least 40% of them, and the space you have left it's all gone. You can't actually find values of the parameters that do all of that extrapolation at the same time. We keep these things the same, and wall clock to sample from the emulator is it's getting really bad to do the univariate thing. The other issue is in what the emulators look like. So just on the top row, we have our best prediction, the difference between the observations and our best prediction with our basis method, and the same for the 8,000 grid box approach. And you can see that they're broadly the same. Yes, we've got biases in our emulator that are in the same place as the univariate case, and ours are slightly better, but it doesn't make a difference. When we sample from the emulators, as you might do when you're doing chains of models like was happening yesterday, you sample from the emulators and you try and push them through another model and another model to make decisions. Our samples look like sea level pressure. Samples from the single grid boxes look the same. So it's great, it works well, but only in one case, and this is my last point. Who has spotlights in their kitchen? Yeah, so this works really well if your model is like a bunch of spotlights that each have their own dimmers. So the patterns of the spotlights, they're fixed, and the parameters are like the dimmer switches, and they make the patterns stronger or not. If your model is such that the spotlights move, so patterns can move in space, this won't work. And so we've developed some kernel methods that do the following. So let's suppose this is the pattern we're interested in, and we want all the models that have the cross. It just doesn't matter where it is. This is what the standard method would do in terms of ranking each of these patterns in terms of closeness to this. So anything where the cross overlaps is close, and then this garbled nonsense is closer than all of these things with the pattern in it. The idea, as simple as it is to use a different distance that means that all of the patterns are closer than the garbled stuff. And we've got it working. I know that's a big deal for people doing agricultural stuff. And I'll leave you with some references.
Thank you very much, Danny.